Welcome to the Grit and Grace podcast, hosted by Tonya Bruton, a faith-filled journey where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit intertwined with the grace of God. Here we delve into recovery stories, mental health, relationships, and deep dives into scripture, chapter by chapter and verse by verse. Our mission is clear: to encourage and inspire, equip the saints, and above all, glorify God through testimonies, Bible studies, interviews, and more. Broadcasting from the heart of Truth Seeker Texas Radio in Decatur, Texas. Catch new episodes every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, with daily replays at 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on www.truthseekertexasradio.com. YouTube and Spotify and other major platforms are uploaded on Thursdays. Get ready to be uplifted and empowered. And now, join us for today's episode of the Grit and Grace podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Grit and Grace podcast. We are your hosts, Tonya and Benjamin Bruton. If any of you, hello, say hello, Ben.
Hello.
Hello. So if you have listened at all to any of season 1, you'll be very familiar with Benjamin.
I was on the 4th episode.
Benjamin was on the 4th episode, but he's also guest hosted. He co-hosted with me. He's hosted his own episode before. So Ben's very familiar with my listeners, or my listeners are very familiar with Benjamin. So, but the reason I have Benjamin on today is I have a very what I hope to be a special episode for you. Benjamin's going to interview me today. So instead of me being the interviewer, I'm going to be sort of the interviewee. And so that this is just a way for me to be able to share parts or as much of my own personal testimony as I can for you guys on the show, because I always have guests come on and share their stories, but and during our discussions, you guys will notice, that I do drop tidbits of parts of my stories here and there. But so today I thought I'd give you guys the opportunity to hear most of it. As I told Benjamin starting out, my story is a little X-rated at times, so I won't be sharing all of it. Bless the Lord. But that just shows where the Lord can bring a person from. So anyways, Jesus can bring us from the farthest depths of sin and hell. So Jesus can reach down and get us, right, Benjamin?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
All right. So, our first new beginning of season 2. Our summer was amazing. We really enjoyed our summer, my mother and I. Unfortunately, we didn't go on any vacations. That sucks. But I got to go on one. I got to go visit my grandparents for a week, and it certainly was a really fun time. And it's great to be back. And it's good to be back. And I've been back for 1 week, and we're gonna start off with an episode. And so, as we know, a testimony is broken in 3 parts: what you were before you met Jesus, how you met the Lord, and who you are after. And so let's go ahead and get started. So what was your childhood like? Start from the beginning.
All right. Well, thank you, Benjamin. So I grew up in a middle-class home in a small town with my mother and my stepfather. My mother and my biological father divorced when I was about 3, and we moved to Texas, and my mom remarried. And so I grew up with her, my stepdad, and my 2 sisters. I had a pretty good, I had a good upbringing. I had a pretty good childhood. I was successful in school for the most part. Growing up until junior high, I was in all the extracurriculars. I was a cheerleader. I was in band. I was always first or second chair. I was in advanced mathematics. I was in basketball, track, gymnastics. I did all of those things. I made great grades. My grandparents were, and you'll find out later on in my story, but they were a big influence in my life. I spent a lot of time with them growing up, like mainly like during, like Benjamin, like you did with your grandparents. I faithfully every summer I went and I stayed with my grandparents, but probably more than a week. I spent lots of times with my grandparents, and I value that because that's where a lot of my where I get a lot of my spiritual influence from. But growing up to a certain point, that's what my childhood was like.
Well, I have a few questions about that childhood of yours. So, what was that like when how did that divorce impact you? Let's just start off with that because that was the first thing you listed.
Well, that's okay. That's a question we didn't talk about, but that's a really good question. Actually, psychologically speaking, that was one of the roots probably of the beginnings of all the issues that you'll see later cropped up in my life. Was the fact that I didn't have my natural father in my life. Now,
Yeah.
here's the story behind that a little bit. Um, so let me just take a deep breath here. How to say it all. My parents were young when they had me. They were 16 and 17. They were both into alcohol and drugs. Um, Now, my mama probably wasn't when she had me, uh, but up until that point in their lives, they were. And so when they divorced, we moved to Texas, like I said, and I never saw my dad again. Now, from my as a child's perspective, from a child my perspective, my daddy didn't love me, and all that I could put in my head. Now there's different conflicting stories of why I never saw him. He says he tried to see me, but my mama wouldn't let him. Mama says he never tried, but whatever. The point is you asked how it impacted me. And the way it impacted me was it made me feel like, wow, I must be worth nothing because the person who created me doesn't even want me. Why would anybody else want me? And I guess it should have been enough that my mama did. I knew my mama loved me, but
Mhm.
I had a hole in me from day one just from that.
I mean, it's remarkable that like you were 3 years old when they were divorced, but it still makes a huge impact because yes, you have one parent, you have one party that loves you and shows all this to you, but you have to have both parties because it took two parties to make one. And so
That's good.
you have abandonment issues on the mother's side and abandonment issues on the father's side. You can get issues from both sides, and
Yeah,
losing a father at 3 and then getting a replacement father that's not, that's not your real father.
right.
It's still kind of it's
Well,
hard to
and
grasp at that age. And
yeah, and let me say this too. You said abandonment issues. A person could have abandonment issues on both the father and mother side. Let me be clear. All love to and respect to my mother today, but I had abandonment issues on my mama's side as well because she was there but wasn't there.
kind of like the
So
lights were on and nobody was home. Like she was there, but going through something.
correct, and
That's one way to say it.
yes, that's a way to say it because as a child, I didn't know what that something was. I knew that I seen evidence of things, but I didn't know I wasn't old enough or exposed enough to that world to know what was going on. But she was using throughout my childhood. And so
Mhm.
when a parent uses alcohol or drugs, they're essentially absent from the home,
Yeah.
even if they're in the home.
Like they can physically be there, but like you look in their eyes and it's kind of like they're off in their own little world because that's what substances take you. You do it because you want to feel that euphoric joy that it gives you, that
Right,
euphoria. Yes.
right. And eventually, you asked about my childhood. Well, my childhood involves some of that as well. I mean, eventually I ended up turning to the same things um, as my parents because part of my story now, I'm going to tell this the best way I can. Of course, Benjamin has heard all of that I'm going to say today, as far as I know. But when I was, things changed for me as far as my childhood. My childhood was interrupted when I was 12 years old. Um, so I lost my virginity to a very violent rape. Now it's funny, not funny, that my therapist would always ask me every time I I would bring it up. My therapist has always said, "Why do you always say that it was a violent rape? Isn't all rape violent?" And I'm like, I never thought about it that way, but it was because, I guess, because it, physically speaking, like, I was beat, so, like, it wasn't just, I didn't want to, and I didn't say no real loud, and then it just quietly happened. I was beat and bruised. So,
Hmm.
so when that happened, I left my body and floated above myself, for the very first time. I mean, it's almost like I imagine my childhood, like what I described to you in the beginning of the show was this perfect kind of picture.
Like
But
rainbows and unicorns, but then that happened and that
but
just took it all away.
that happened, and that perfect, beautiful Mona Lisa was just ripped to shreds, like someone just punched a hole in the Mona Lisa, like, like, you know. But so, and let me just say here to, laughter is a trauma response. So you
It's
guys
a
listen,
coping mechanism,
yeah.
for
Well,
like,
and it's involuntary. So you,
hmm,
anybody listening or watching, trauma is in no way, shape, or form funny. But me, um, I
it's not a
I'm
laughing
still,
matter, but
it's
some people can't control it,
right. Like, we tend to laugh uncontrollably in situations that people take very seriously. So, anyways,
That's just like
yeah, so this happens to me, and it really changed the course of my life. I became very promiscuous, um for now for two reasons. Okay. uh that was the first time I had ever had intercourse, but um I was always seeking a man's love. So now that I've already had sex, I'm thinking, okay, well, what is the word I'm trying to use? All bets are off now, because
hmm.
I've already done it now. And you have thoughts like, if you've been raped or violated, you have thoughts of, well, what's the point in me saying no? They're going to do it anyways. Why not save myself the horror of being beat up and just do what they ask? Right. So, because that's what I learned. If I said no, it did no good. Someone took it from me anyway. So maybe I should just say yes from now on out and don't fight, so I don't get hurt. And then there, and excuse me, I don't know why I'm getting upset. And so then there were times where, of course, like I said in the beginning, I had that hole from my daddy. And so, a lot of girls become promiscuous out
Hmm.
of, the desire to fill that hole, to have a father
Yes,
figure in their life.
I've read into a lot of that abandonment issues, and I also like I've spoke to you about my previous third relationship. I am seeing that similarity between you two is that you were missing a father figure and you didn't have that kind of love. And so you seek that validation in other men, and you realize like, oh, if I give them sex, that's where I get that validation. And so if I or the thing or like you said, to protect yourself physically, if you say no, they're just gonna do it anyways and force it upon you and do whatever it takes to get what they want. And so, like, in order to get that validation, you just have to just cave in, give up, and just submit yourself under them for because
Right.
you're weak and vulnerable. You can't do anything about it. Like,
Right. And I was submitting myself to what they were doing too, as far as like drugs and alcohol goes. So I was being promiscuous, and these were older guys. So they were high school guys, and they were, if they were drinking, I was drinking. If they were huffing paint, I was huffing paint. If they were huffing Freon out of the car, I was huffing Freon out of the car. They were smoking weed, I was smoking weed. So and it, well, I think as far as substances goes, it really all started it behind the art building at the junior high at recess. I was smoking cigarettes to be cool, but but anyways, once I started down that path, I ended up dropping out of high school in ninth grade. I ended up becoming pregnant soon thereafter uh with my firstborn child, your oldest sister, Cara Dawn,
Hmm.
who has also been on the show before. Um Cara was born with a terminal or yeah, a terminal illness called biliary atresia, in which case she needed a liver or she was going to die. Um, so at the age of 16, I became the fourth person in the state of Texas to donate my liver to participate in living related liver organ transplantation because the liver is unlike other organs, it can regenerate itself. And so they were just learning how to do that. Um, so yeah, so Kara's since Kara has had another transplant, another liver transplant, and also a kidney transplant, so she's
Hmm.
a 3-time organ transplant recipient. But so, anyways, I had Kara, and then I got married to her dad. Uh, we ended up having another child together, my son Blake.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And things were going pretty good for my first husband and our two kids and me for a little while. Until like we were going to church and everything. Now, mind you, I didn't bring this up at the beginning, but I did say that my grandparents were a huge spiritual influence in my life, but my mama always did take us to church. I did grow up in the church. So even though I was doing all those things that I said I was doing early on in life,
Hmm.
I was still going to church. It's just I didn't know anything about discipleship and relationship. I was never taught that. I was taught your basics in church and all the Sunday school lessons and all the Bible readings um and all the theology that there was to know, but I was never taught discipleship and relationship. Um so anyways, but things with my first husband, Kara and Blake and I were going pretty well. We were going to church and everything like that until my first husband started drinking again and he went to prison and we had to move back to Texas.
Hmm. I would like to ask, so I just thought of like a bunch of great things to just talk about stuff, but I want to just, I know you just said all of that and all that, much,
A lot. And
I've already
I'm
processed all
sorry.
of it, and I already have a bunch of questions in my head about it. But
Okay.
so I'm gonna go back to the beginning.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start back. So I asked about the divorce, and I want to add. So your two sisters, did y'all share the same father?
No, we didn't, but
So
notice I don't use the word half sibling. I don't like that word.
exactly, yes. So how was that growing up? Like,
It was well, it was fine. I love my sisters. My sisters and I are very, 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 very close, but
of
not
course,
close,
yeah.
but not close in age. So,
Hmm.
I'm 7 years older than the first little sister, Cassie, um,
Hmm.
who's also helped with one of my shows. It's a family
Hmm.
affair. I'm 7 years older than her, so I was seven when she was obviously seven when she was born, and didn't want much to do with her. Because I was DJ's age, so the last thing I wanted was this baby taking up my parents' attention. But but I helped take care of them. Sarah came along, my youngest sister, 4 years later, so I'm 11 years older than Sarah. So excuse me. So you have to think when Sarah was 2 years old was when I was starting to be preteen and things like that were
And
starting to
all that
happen.
stuff happening to you,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I didn't really get a chance to develop a real close relationship with her, before my mom and stepdad
So
got divorced. So
yeah.
we got separated then. Mhm.
So I'm wondering, did any of that stuff that happened to you ever happen to them?
No,
So how does that make you feel? Like, do you feel like do you feel
I feel thankful for
happy?
them.
Like you're thankful?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But do you ever
I
like
mean, I
wonder though,
mean,
like, why did
I'm
this all happen to me? And
no, 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 not in that respect.
yeah, of course.
I mean, granted, now I say that those things didn't happen to my sisters, but first and foremost, I don't want to speak for my sisters because
Yeah,
there may have been things happen to them that I don't know about. And then
yeah,
number two, they didn't have an easy life themselves. They had
yeah,
they had other things different things that were happening with
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah, of course. So when you dropped out of high school, so you did go to college eventually, and so like when did you get your GED from your high school? And how'd you
Excuse,
go about doing that?
yeah. So excuse me. Um, so yeah, I dropped out at 16. So when I married Kara and Blake's daddy, we both went and got our GEDs when we were 18. Uh, I ended up going to college when I was in my oh early 20s. Early 20s. Mhm. You'll find out
Okay.
about that as I go on in the story.
All right, so lost my train of thought for some reason. I was thinking of something. Uh so how did you meet? So you had the twins, Sadie and Madison. How did you meet their father? Like how did that happen?
Okay.
Like
So,
what relationship and situation were you in? Were you with Karen
well,
Blake's father, or was
right.
that after that divorce?
Okay, good question. So following my first husband going to prison, I had what's called a nervous breakdown. Now, you may have heard that term thrown around in a joke or something. But a nervous breakdown, I don't know what it looks like, I guess, for everyone, but for me, what it looked like is I went catatonic. So, my sister-in-law had come. So here I was 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. And I had Kara who was 4, 5 years old, um, always sick, having to go to hospitals, which were always far away because she had to have specialists. And then I had a newborn baby, Blake, who was waking up in the middle of the night to be fed. Um, and then my husband was gone to prison, and I had to go to work, so I had to get a job, and I just crashed under the weight of all that and couldn't keep up. And my sister-in-law had came to get me for work one morning, and I couldn't speak, so I was stuck in the chair, um, staring off. Turns out, side note, everyone, I have DID, so when I first left my body at the age of 12, I split. So DID is called dissociative identity
Identity
disorder.
disorder.
And so when I left my body, my psyche split into parts. So anyways, so I may have had a nervous breakdown, or I may have just been in a serious dissociative state, because she came to pick me up and I couldn't speak. All I could do, I could see them there, I could hear them talking to me, but I couldn't reply. So they were smart enough to like get my mom on the phone and tell my mom exactly how to get to where I was, because I was states away. I was in Missouri. And so my mom drove from Texas to Missouri, got me in my little Pinto that I had. We fit all crammed all I could cram in there. I left my furniture, my yearbooks, all of my belongings there, and came to live in Texas. And one of the first things I did after I got depressed, down and depressed, smoking weed and stuff, was I looked up an old quote boyfriend from when I was like in my teens, and that's Madison's dad and Sadie's daddy. I got pregnant. I was so now Now I'm a single mom, living in, oh, they weren't government apartments, but uh ghettoville, okay, apartments.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and I had Kara who was still sick, and then I had Blake who was, going on, he was still a toddler, less than 1 years old. I become pregnant again, and I went to go have an abortion, and that is when they told me that I was having twins. I did not have the abortion. That's a whole long story in itself, but I did not have the abortion. Madison and Sadie were born, and that's kind of, I don't want to keep going without giving you a chance to ask more questions.
Yeah, and so now Madison's alive now, and Sadie didn't make it past a few months, and but my question is, so how did you? So were you able to work, or did you have somebody watch the two kids? Like,
My
you
mama,
see,
my mama has always been there for me. So let me make this clear about my mama. Don't ever talk about my mama. I'm not talking to you, Benjamin. I'm talking to the
I
world.
know.
I'm talking to the world here. Don't ever talk about my mama, because this Texas, Oklahoma girl will just like slap you into next week. But because my mom, one thing I can say for my mom is she's always been there for me. She always will be there for me. She will cut for me. She was the reason I made it through almost everything that I made it through. Besides the Lord, of course. I'm talking about earthly people. So yeah, my mama, what we would do was switch off. So when Kara would have to go to the hospital, she would have to be there for like weeks or months at a time. So,
Hmm.
and of course it was far away. It was in Houston. We lived north of Dallas. So, and if anybody's ever looked at the state of Texas on the map, that's far away. We didn't have cell phones back then. My mom would go and stay with her at the hospital. I would stay at home with Blake and Maddie, or vice versa. We would switch. I would go to the hospital, and my mom would stay home with the little kids. So neither one of us could work. So there were times we were selling blood at the blood bank. We were stealing formula from the hospital um, to feed Kara, Blake, and Maddie. So it was rough.
Um, this is reminding me of like that movie we watched, the Hillbilly Ugly movie, and
The Hillbilly
it's also
Elegy.
Elegy movie, and it's also reminding me of the Miracles from Heaven movie, how they had to go back and forth to the hospital and go to hospital, and it's so far away, and
It was
I think
just like that.
one of the parents started losing hope, and then the other parent kept on. I think it was the mother. She kept her hopes up, and the dad almost lost hope, and then eventually the daughter survived. And now look at Karen. She's running at 32, and she's still surviving. Going at it, still trucking, which
Right.
is miraculous, really. And,
Right.
and so, how was that? You're 16 years old, and you're having to donate your own kidney for your daughter to survive. Like, how was that decision for you?
It was her liver, and it was
Yeah, liver. Yeah.
yeah, it was very maternally instinctive for me to do that. I had to go before like a board of ethics committee to have them evaluate me by a psychiatrist to make sure that I was responsible enough and what do you call it, mature enough to make the decision, because it was a life-threatening operation and it was still in its experimental stages. And I'm like, I thought, well, this is a no-brainer. I mean, if I'm mature enough and old enough to make the baby, then I'm mature enough and old enough to save the baby.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, but it was a very difficult surgery and operation. It was very painful. I was in the hospital for 2.5 months. They had to open up my rib cage.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, so if that was a maternal instinct to save Kara, like giving your liver, why did abortion cross your mind when you had when you had gotten pregnant for the third time?
Because I was pregnant for the third time.
Because you've had
No.
5 total pregnancies and 8 total kids, and
Well,
one of
okay.
them was a
Yeah.
twin that passed. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. And we can talk about how Sadie passed,
Hmm.
just real briefly, but
Yeah.
my daughter Sadie, to the listeners, I want them to know about my life. And so, and about my testimony, it's part of my testimony. But when Sadie, one of the twins, I was pregnant with twins that I did not abort. By the way, the reason I went to the abortion clinic was because Kara was in the hospital at that time and was sick, needing the second transplant. Blake was less than 1 year old. We were poorer than dirt. And now, you know what I mean? I'm pregnant again by some random dude. So, like, of course, I'm going to think about having an abortion. Why do all women think about, not all, I shouldn't say, I don't mean all women, excuse me. Why do a lot of many other women think about it? And I want to also include this disclaimer here. I do not shame any woman who has had an abortion. God will forgive you. God will help erase those, not erase, but heal those memories and that guilt and shame that you might be feeling from that. So I don't want any to send out any guilt or shame vibes from my show on abortion. I don't that's why I don't ever really bring up the topic. But so anyways, I ended up having the twins. But as you know, when Sadie was about 2.5, 3 months old, in, you know, close to there, on Mother's Day, it was discovered that I had rolled onto her in the middle of the night on the couch sleeping and suffocated her, accidentally. But was that's the significant part of my story, Benjamin, because that was my third break. That's so I had the break when I was raped and I left my body. I had the huge break when
Dissociative session
yeah,
when
and so
your sister-in-law.
yeah, and so when Sadie died, I completely fractured. I think that whatever
You
was
must have been, that had to have been like distraught and jarring to just like,
whatever
you go,
was left in my brain was completely fractured.
yeah, like when you go from breastfeeding your child, falling asleep, and then boom, you wake up and then
And they're dead underneath you. Yeah.
still lifeless child.
Yeah, yeah, that broke me into a million little pieces. And I never recovered from that. Like, for example, for I mean, the Lord's healing me now, bless the Lord. It's been 20 something years. But
Mhm.
but for about 10 or 15 years of Karen Blake's life and Madison's life, they were not allowed to celebrate Mother's Day. You know, whenever we would go to church and it'd be like, okay, whoever's got the most kids gets a gift, whoever's like the oldest mother gets a gift. I would intentionally either not go on that day or I would sit in the back, very, very mad. I mean, if I ever got angry at God and asked, why did this have to happen to me? It was that right there. That was the sole thing. Why did that right there have to happen? Everything else could have happened. Kara could be sick and nearly died. Rate me all you want. But why did that have to happen? And why did it have to happen like it happened? Oh, goodness gracious. But
Mhm.
for many, many years, I was probably angry with God, if not like consciously, but subconsciously. Um,
Mhm.
and I was angry with society. If I would see another set of twins, like say in the store or something, I would get angry that they got to keep both of theirs and I didn't. Um, so yeah, um, until I met your father, I had a very rough time with that. And stuff. So, and it's until the Holy Spirit really got a hold of me, and we could talk about that whenever you're ready. I had a really rough time with that and all the other things that I
Yeah.
went through.
So like, so when you had Noah Joshua, so you had Kara at what, like 14,
16,
15? Yeah,
16.
16, and Blake Evan at 16, correct?
No,
And 7,
19.
19, and then Madison
At
Sky
20,
and Sadie Marie
at
at
21.
20, and then you had Noah Joshua when 2005, and that was you would have been like
I would have been 30, wouldn't I? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to give away all my private information like my date of birth and social on here and
No,
stuff.
well, yeah, no, 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 that's
But
not,
or my age for that matter.
no.
So
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's like it's been so long since you've had your last pregnancy. So you've had three, and then it's been so long. So how was it having your fourth pregnancy? How was that like?
Well,
Like, and
okay.
this one was more voluntary. Like you wanted this one.
Well, I wanted all of them,
Well, yeah,
but
of course, but like this one
but
was like
yeah, I know I understand what you're saying. So let me kind of get let me
you
back
weren't
up.
under any influence or anything
Right,
like that. Like this was like,
right. Let me back up
yeah,
just a hair here because
hmm,
I haven't even married dad yet to like get to know us. So let me
yeah,
let me back up just a hair.
yeah. Let's do that. Let's
Um
take care of that first. Yeah.
yeah. So what happened is after Sadie had died, um, I got into some heavier drugs, really, really, really bad, and a lot of bad stuff was going on. So this is one of the things I don't want to talk about. So we're gonna say a lot of bad things were going on. Um, and God, I had an experience with God in my room one day, um, where it kind of flooded with this spiritual darkness. And this voice, like inaudible voice inside of me, said, you realize that if you continue in this vein, you're going straight to hell, right? And more words or less is what the inaudible voice was telling me, something inside me. And then right after that, it's like the darkness dispelled and the room filled up with a light,
It just
and
flooded.
it just flooded with a light. And then the light said, but you know, right, if you come back to me, I'll take you back.
Hmm.
I always take you back, and I'll help you, and I'll restore your life. And so I did exactly what I knew to do, which was find the nearest Pentecostal church I could find, because that's what my nanny and papa raised me in. I am in no way saying that's the only way. But anyways, so I found the nearest church and hopped right in there and went straight to that altar. And before the preacher could even come over to me, he was on his way to walk over to me and pray for me. But as he went to go step off the platform to come to me, I had already hit the floor and was talking in tongues and was full of the Holy Ghost. And so, and that's where I met your daddy. I met your daddy in that church. Josh and I have been married for 23 years. I can't ever get it right. He can. It's either 23 or 24. I think it's 23. But I don't want to short us either.
I would
But
say like 23 because y'all got married in '01, correct?
okay,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I met your daddy, and here's the thing, guys. This wonderful man took me on with my three kids, and he had never had his own kids. So I had at the time, give me 1 second here, I gotta get a drink. Um, I got a lot of story to tell, but so yeah. So I had had my tubes tied after I had my last set of children. So we had to save up a lot of money to go to Kentucky to have my tubal ligation reversed. And that was done by the incredible Dr. Richard Levine in Louisville, Kentucky. If anybody's interested, I highly recommend him. He has high success rates, and he's one of the most affordable and most successful doctors in the country performing that operation. So, anyways, we saved up our money. We went and we saw Dr. Levine, and he reversed my my tubal ligation, and we had Noah Joshua. He was born a beautiful baby boy, and as far as we knew, totally healthy until he was about 9 days old, and that's when he turned blue at home and he was care flighted to cooks, and we found out that he has hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is, in other words, half of a constructed heart. So
Hmm.
yeah. So
And
that yeah. And so
yeah,
you asked about, well, you asked about the what it was like to have kids again after it had been so long. Well,
and how all those happened and how like
yeah.
that whole
Mm-hmm.
experience was. And
Mm-hmm.
so how'd you take that news when because like your first child was like just was chronically ill and she still is, and then you have your fourth pregnancy and you're like, oh, here we go again. He's got something wrong with him too. So like, how was that for you? Were you just like,
I didn't take it well. I didn't take it well at all. Another reason is due to the fact that when Sadie died, they care flighted her body to the NICU or the PICU in Cook's Children's in Fort Worth after they had gave her a shot of adrenaline to um make her heart beat again. And they ran tests on her to determine whether or not she had any brain activity, and of course she did not. And so I had to pull the plug on her in that very hospital room that Noah was in. So when they care flighted him to Cook's, they care flighted him to that very, very same room that Sadie died in. And so here I have these doctors telling me my 9-month-old has half a heart and there's only 40%. They told me, they said there's only 40% chance that he will live. They said the chance that he will live is so low that legally you can take him home and not do anything and he'll just go. So I don't think Noah realizes
how lucky he is? Yeah,
how lucky he is, because they're like we can do a heart transplant, but they said, as familiar as you are with transplants, you're going to want to avoid that at all costs. And I said, yeah, I do. And they're like, there's this other thing that we can do. And they explained it to me, and they said, of course, like with Kara's thing, they're like, it's experimental still. It's not real new, and
because
they don't have a real high success rate with it yet,
yeah,
but
wasn't there also
it was the best option.
yeah, wasn't there also something wrong with Sadie's heart when she
Yeah,
was like she had something wrong with her heart? I
yeah,
forgot what
she had a
that.
heart murmur. She had a
Yeah,
heart murmur, but we never figured out what it was because she passed.
yeah, and
Hmm.
so like that must have been like kind of scary because you realize
Oh yeah, yeah,
your
sorry.
fifth son is like, oh, he's also got a heart problem too. And so the first kid to have a heart problem, you remember what happened to her? She didn't make it. So like
Right, and yeah. So I was having flashbacks all coming back to me, like all conglomerate in my head, and
all
so
these what ifs and
yeah. So when the doctor like said that to me, all I wanted to do was run. Like you have a fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. You fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And I'm a flight person. Actually, I'm a fight person too. I like to fight. Okay.
yeah, but
No, no, but okay. But in that moment, I wanted to fly. Like I did take off. I took off and no one could find me. But I ended up just hiding like in one of those extra like offices in the hospital and crying. But what I wanted to do was walk right out the front door of that hospital and just keep on walking. Like if I walked into traffic on the highway, then that's where I walked. I just wanted just to walk until I could just no longer go on. you know, that's how I handled that. But but what the cool thing about Noah is he was born under a sign. Um, Let me back up a little bit about this. And then how we got his name, because and I'll try to hurry because I know we're getting along on time here. But so I had the tubal ligation reversal, and so me and Josh start trying to have a baby. Well, I had a miscarriage. So technically, I've been pregnant more times than what you said, because I had a miscarriage in the
so
bathroom.
six total
Yeah,
pregnancies.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I had a miscarriage in the bathroom. And so when we got pregnant again, we were very like worried about if it was gonna live and stay a viable pregnancy. We were on a trip somewhere in Austin, I think down in Austin, and it was raining one day, and I was feeling really sick, like from being pregnant, like what do you call it? What is it called when you're sick and you're pregnant? Morning sickness. Yeah. Anyways, was feeling like that. I remember looking out at the rain, and had went in to eat. And this might sound silly to some people, but when we came outside, we saw a rainbow. And so we looked at each other and we're like, okay, because we had just prayed, I think, about it. You know what I mean? And so we saw a rainbow. Well, after the pregnancy went on and it turned out to be good, we decided, and when we were thinking of names, we decided to name him Noah for that rainbow. Well, when he was in the hospital, and we thought we were going to lose him, someone had sent us a card. Course, they probably did this because of his name, now that I'm thinking about it, but the card had a rainbow on it. And I thought it was a sign, and it's still in his baby book today. And but yeah, and it was to me, that was a sign that he was gonna make it, and he made it. So yeah.
And he's still
He's
he's
still he's just still kicking.
he's yeah, he's thriving to this day, doing his job at
Yeah.
Sewell, UTI University,
Yeah.
tech school, and
Yeah.
got his girlfriend, which is just great. I'm proud of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and then you had your sixth pregnancy, which would
Which is
be
you
the
guys, which is you
triplets.
triplets.
We're the
The
first.
triplets.
So like, here's what I'm noticing though. Like, we're like the first, pregnancy with kids that
That
you've
was
had
normal. That was
that
normal.
that didn't have any physical problems. I mean, maybe some mental, but physical problems like that were so severe that were like that
Yeah.
would have caused you to be like, oh goodness, are they going to survive? But how is
Right.
that though? Because your third pregnancy was a set of twins, and the other half didn't make it. But how was that though? You had a pregnancy with triplets, and all three of them made it. Like,
I felt like God gave me back something I lost in Sadie. As a matter of fact, not to creep anybody out, and then Molly's never gonna watch this, but Psycho, when I was like, I guess sleep deprived and getting out in the middle of the night and feeding them, like a couple of times I thought Molly was Sadie, but I felt like God gave me back, like he could have just gave me twins, but he gave me one extra, but to not replace Sadie, because Sadie could never be replaced,
mm-mm.
but to give me, like, what do you call it, an overflowing, like I talked about in church this morning, an overflowing of joy and blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's like triplets. I was like, yeah, I've heard. They're like, do they run in your family? I'm like, twins do, but not triplets. Twins do on every side of my tree, but not triplets. I've never met anybody in person to have that many multiples. I've heard about it on TV, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
I felt like God gave me an abundant, overflowing blessing to not make up for what I lost, but kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to kind of like, you know, you've got like I don't know how to think of it. I can't think of the right, phrase or saying or word, but like you've gone through so much, but you came back to him and you were baptized in the water and in the Holy Ghost, and he gave you a blessing, not only two, but three, and one of
Yeah.
them did me.
Yeah, one of them was you. Exactly. And so I just want to just like kind of bring this to an end here, because I don't like to go over too long. But and I'm glad we did it this way, Benjamin. Thank you for your help today. Thank you for your questions, because I tend to focus, I'll just say this to the listeners. Everybody knows I'm in recovery, or so I don't have to highlight the last 15 years where I was like out in it. Um, you guys have heard, I think, those stories. So I guess what I'm saying is, Ben, I'm glad we didn't focus solely on the latter years of my addiction, because I don't want to just talk about that, especially with you. So you know what I mean, because some of that's R-rated stuff. But suffice it enough to say, me and Josh, we had Noah, we had the triplets. They did wonderful, but I ended up having a real bad relapse. that lasted a real long time, but God brought me through again, like he did many times before. And that's where and here I am today, witnessing to you guys about the love and power of God to save, to deliver, to heal, to set free, to sanctify us holy. Praise God. So any of you, to heal our broken hearts and to bind up our wounds. God is here to wipe away the tears from your eyes, to not, like I said, erase memories. You know what I mean? God won't help you forget, but he will help you heal. He will help you see things differently. He will help you see it in a different light. So I just hope that you all listening today have gotten something out of my story, because I'm not here to talk about me. I'm not here to waste anybody's time. I'm not here to waste my breath. I'm here to testify of the goodness and power of God. The goodness and power of God. I'm going to have to edit that out. I'm here to witness that God is mighty to save. I'm here to testify that God is mighty to save to the uttermost. All right. And he will grab you from the uttermost depths to save you to the uttermost. So thanks for listening so much
Like
today.
the deepest depths.
Yes. So thanks, Benjamin, for interviewing me today. Thank you all for listening today. I pray a special blessing over you as you continue to pray for me in this podcast and pray for my family. I pray for you and your family. And I pray that, God would continue to open doors in your life and close doors that need to be shut. I pray, that God will bless you financially, bless you in your body, bless your health, save your kids, all of those things that you need. I'm praying for that in Jesus' name. Benjamin, do you have any final words or anything before we close out?
Yes, of course. So yeah, this wraps up and concludes the testimony. And I would like to just add that this very podcast itself is a part of the testimony, because you got what she had, before she met God, and then, how she met God. We heard that, and then now we have how she is after she met God, and God gave her the voice to have this podcast to speak to this audience. Y'all are
Awesome.
this whole podcast is an aftermath. This is like something that it's part of the testimony, because it's got to.
Benjamin, that's so well said. That is so well said. And thank you for bringing that out. And thank Mike McInerney and Charlie Smither for asking me to do this very show and for trusting me. I'm so very honored. I'm so very honored that I have two wonderful, wonderful mighty men of God, wise men of God in my life that have entrusted this show to me. And so I just thank them and honor them for that right now.
For that
But
opportunity, yes.
for the opportunity. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode of the Grit and Grace podcast. You be blessed in Jesus' name. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the Grit and Grace podcast. Don't forget to follow me on social media on Facebook at the Grit and Grace podcast, TikTok, and Instagram. I've always provide all my updates on my social platforms, and I look forward to seeing you there. Again, be blessed in Jesus' name, and pray for me as I continue to pray for you. Thanks again for watching the Grit and Grace podcast. Bye-bye.